For many years, the world looked at Minka Kelly and saw a woman who had it all. With her stunning looks, her talent on the screen, and her presence on some of the most popular television shows of the last 2 decades, she seemed like the definition of a Hollywood success story. Most people remember her as Lila Garrity, the beautiful cheerleader on Friday Night Lights, or as the face of various high-fashion brands. She was often featured on lists of the most beautiful women in the world, and her dating life was a constant source of fascination for the tabloids. But behind that perfect smile and the glamorous red carpet appearances, there was a story of deep pain, instability, and a childhood that was far from the dream it appeared to be. The reality of Minka Kelly's life is much more complex and, in many ways, much sadder than anyone realized. Today we are going to dive into the untold story of Minka Kelly, exploring the tragedies she faced growing up, the complicated relationship with her parents, and the secret struggle she had to overcome to find her own peace. You will want to stay with us until the very end of this video because we are going to talk about a specific revelation from her recent memoir that changed how everyone sees her and why she says she is finally free from her past. The tragedy of Minka Kelly's life begins long before she ever set foot in Hollywood. She was born in Los Angeles, but her childhood was anything but stable. Her father was Rick Dufay, a guitarist for the famous rock band Aerosmith, but he wasn't really a part of her early life. Instead, Minka was raised primarily by her mother, Maureen Kelly. Maureen was a single mother who worked as a dancer in strip clubs to make ends meet. This meant that Minka's early years were defined by chaos, poverty, and a constant feeling of not belonging anywhere. They moved around a lot, often living in motels or small apartments, and sometimes they didn't even have a permanent place to call home. This level of instability is hard for any child, but for Minka, it was all she knew. She spent a lot of her time alone while her mother worked long hours, and she had to learn how to take care of herself at an age when most kids are still playing with toys. One of the saddest parts of Minka's story is the complicated relationship she had with her mother. Maureen was a woman who loved her daughter deeply, but she also struggled with her own demons. She dealt with addiction and a lifestyle that made it difficult to provide a safe and consistent environment for a growing girl. Minka has spoken about how she felt more like the parent than the child. She had to navigate her mother's moods, her financial struggles, and the frequent moves from one city to another. There were times when they would go to sleep in a motel and wake up not knowing where their next meal was coming from. This scrapping for survival created a deep sense of anxiety in Minka that stayed with her for years. She learned to hide her feelings and to put on a brave face, a skill that would later help her as an actress but cost her a lot in terms of her emotional health. The absence of her father during these formative years was another layer of tragedy. Rick Dufay wasn't there to provide the stability or the protection that Minka so desperately needed. It wasn't until she was an adult that they truly reconnected and built a relationship. Growing up without a father figure while also having a mother who was often absent or struggling left Minka feeling very much alone in the world. She didn't have a safety net, and she didn't have anyone to guide her. This lack of a foundation is something she has spent most of her adult life trying to heal. The secret to her success was her ability to survive, but the tragedy was that she had to survive at all. She was a child who was forced to grow up way too fast, missing out on the simple joys of a normal upbringing. Before she became a famous actress, Minka's life was still a struggle. She didn't just walk into a lead role on a TV show. She worked as a scrub nurse and a surgical assistant for several years. She has talked about how she would work long shifts at the hospital and then go to auditions, often still wearing her scrubs. This was a time when she was just trying to pay her bills and find a way out of the cycle of poverty that had defined her childhood. She was a hard worker who was used to the grind, but she also felt like an outsider in the world of Hollywood. She didn't have the connections or the money that many of her peers had. She was a regular girl with a very heavy past, trying to make it in a town that prizes perfection over reality. Her big break finally came with Friday Night Lights, and suddenly the world knew her name. But even as she became a star, the tragedies of her personal life continued to follow her. The media became obsessed with her dating life, and she was often unfairly labeled as a serial dater because of her high-profile relationships with men like Derek Jeter, Chris Evans, and Trevor Noah. This public judgment was another form of sadness for Minka. The tabloids focused on who she was seen with rather than who she was as a person. They didn't know about the little girl who had lived in motels or the woman who had worked in hospitals to survive. They just saw a beautiful actress and made assumptions. For Minka, this felt like another way of being misunderstood and misrepresented, just as she had been when she was a kid. The ultimate tragedy in Minka's life was the loss of her mother. Despite all the chaos and the difficult years, Minka and Maureen were incredibly close. They shared a bond that was forged in the fire of their shared struggles. In 2008, as Minka's career was reaching new heights, Maureen was diagnosed with colon cancer. Minka dropped everything to be by her side, caring for her just as she had done when she was a child. The final months of her mother's life were both beautiful and heartbreaking. They were able to find a level of reconciliation and peace that they hadn't had before. Minka has said that even though her mother wasn't perfect, she was her best friend and her biggest cheerleader. When Maureen passed away, a huge part of Minka's world went with her. It was the end of the only constant relationship she had ever known, and the grief was overwhelming. In her recent memoir, Tell Me Everything, Minka opened up about these tragedies in a way that left her fans speechless. She revealed that the perfect life people saw on screen was a mask for a reality that included domestic violence, toxic relationships, and a constant search for self-worth. She spoke about a time in her life when she felt she had to trade her own happiness to keep others happy. This honesty was a turning point for her. By telling her story, she was finally able to own her past instead of being ashamed of it. She wanted people to know that it is okay to come from a messy background and that your past doesn't have to define your future. This revelation was a secret she had kept for a long time, fearing that if people knew the truth, they wouldn't look at her the same way. But instead, it made her fans love and respect her even more.